We're fearlessly talking about the biggest stories that matter to you the most. Breaking news, John Calipari is finalizing a 5-year deal to become the Arkansas Razorbacks' next head coach, covering college sports like no one else. The biggest guests in sports. We now welcome in Hall of Famer Jim Calhoun.
Such a pride I had, I came to connect.
The legend, Tim Tebow, joins us.
We'll run it back. I like it.
The legend, Herschel Walker. Welcome in, everybody. Tuesday morning edition, Aaron Torres Sports Podcast. I'm your host, Aaron Torres. Hope everybody's doing well. Hope everybody's having a great day. And when I tell you that we have ourselves a loaded Wednesday episode of the Aaron Torres Sports Podcast, let me just tell you, yeah, we got a loaded show. By the way, did I lead by saying a Tuesday morning episode? I don't know. It's early here on the West Coast, but we have so much to talk about. I don't know how we're going to fit it all in. Okay, so we're going to start top 25 matchup, Rupp Arena, Kentucky, the sweep of Tennessee. Positives, negatives for Kentucky. Obviously, Lamont Butler re-injures that shoulder. We'll talk a little bit about that, but also I think there's a lot of positives coming out of that game. The resilience, the toughness, other guys stepping up, all that good stuff. From there, we will go to beautiful Omaha, Nebraska. I've actually been to Omaha. It is beautiful. Liam McNeely, 38 points for UConn. Cannot believe the effort from the freshman. What does it mean for the Huskies, who kind of sort of needed that win? And oh, by the way, we got plenty from Dan Hurley. You know Dan Hurley had some thoughts on what happened in Omaha on Tuesday night. We'll talk a little bit about the Big Ten. 3 marquee games. Here's the issue, though. They were all on streaming, Peacock only. I don't even know how many of you watched them. I think this Peacock thing is starting to hurt the Big Ten. And finally, we'll wrap. It's never too early to look ahead to the big game this weekend. Number 1 Auburn at number 2 Alabama. I don't know about you all, but I cannot wait for that one. So we got ourselves a busy show, a jam-packed show. So let's go ahead and dive in. Before we do, quick reminder, one, make sure that you are subscribed to the Aaron Torres Pod YouTube channel. On YouTube, new clips, new videos going up every single day. By the way, who wants to be a friend and share the YouTube channel with others? We're closing in on 50,000 subscribers, a little over 100 more subscribers, and we will be there. So tag a friend. If you're watching on Twitter, on X, find us over on YouTube. Just search Aaron Torres. You'll find me there. I'm impossible to miss. Closing in on 50,000 subscribers. Also, make sure you subscribe to the podcast, Apple, Spotify, wherever you get your podcast. And if you want to do your boy Torres a solid, leave a 5-star rating, leave a 5-star review as well. Also, before we get started, you already know, I want to thank our friends. I want to thank our partners. I want to thank Cauli Puffs and CauliPuffs.com. Okay, so I've told you about Cauli Puffs for months now. The new age health food snack in your grocery aisle. You don't need all that crappy Doritos and Fritos and Lay's and this and Ruffles. They're all good, but they're not healthy for you, and they are not as delicious as Cauli Puffs as well. Okay, so I've told you Cauli Puffs story many times now, but owner of the company, Joey, he's a football fan just like you and I, family-owned company, not far from where I live, and he was sitting on the couch one day, basically sitting there saying, I need something for me that's healthy to eat, but also delicious. I need something healthy for my kids, and that's where Cauli Puffs comes in. Baked, not fried, avocado oil, no grease, healthy ingredients. But the best part is they taste freaking delicious. Many of you have tried them thanks to this pod. I appreciate your support of Cauli Puffs. But if you haven't tried them yet, what are you doing? For more information, go to CauliPuffs.com. That's CauliPuffs.com. CauliPuffs.com. You can also get them on Amazon.com. Whatever's already in that cart, I don't want to know, you little freak. I don't want to know what's in that Amazon cart. But what you can do is throw some Cauli Puffs in as well and try them there. You've heard of Amazon. You use Amazon probably every day. So throw some Cauli Puffs in. Tell them Torres sent you. We appreciate your support. Thank you to Cauli Puffs and CauliPuffs.com. With that said, it is a busy Tuesday night. It was a busy Tuesday night in college hoops. It is a busy Wednesday morning. There is no more time to waste. So let's get to the topic of the day. Listen, there were 2 top 25 matchups. You know, I'll be honest. Unfortunately, I think a lot of you probably didn't see the other one. 2 top 20 matchups, I should say. We'll get to Purdue and Michigan in a minute. But I do want to start with the big one. Tennessee traveling to Rupp Arena. We all remember the game 2 weeks ago. Kentucky was down 2, 3, 4 guys in that game. and Kentucky ends up winning in Knoxville. Is kind of one of the more stunning results of the season. Well, the return game was Tuesday night at Rupp, but the result was the same. 75-64 is your final score. Kentucky sweeping the Tennessee Volunteers. Tennessee in the top 5, 20-5 overall, but 2 of their losses are to the border rival. From the Kentucky perspective, listen, I think there's some negatives and also a lot of positives as well. I'm not a glasses half empty guy, but I think we have to acknowledge the elephant in the room. Kentucky's a little bit banged up right now. Jackson Robinson, their second leading scorer, did not play in this game. Looks like a wrist injury. I saw him, I think somebody tweeted something, and he was tweeting back at fans. Listen, nobody thinks that Jackson Robinson's faking an injury. Whatever. He had a brace on his wrist, but you certainly hope he's going to get healthy. Then, of course, again, I don't want to be glasses half empty, but I think it's part of the story of the game is Lamont Butler goes down with an injury as well. Lamont Butler, Kentucky's point guard, he's their leader. I don't even think it's a debate at this point that he's not only their most important player, I would argue he is one of the most important players in all of college basketball for his specific team. He's playing really well. Probably about 2 or 3 minutes before what happened, had a big strip and score that gave the team momentum and everybody's feeling good. Then he goes down. He had a shoulder injury that he missed some time with. By the way, missed some time earlier in the season at Gonzaga. I remember that game as well. Well, he re-injures the shoulder. He comes out. He does not come back in. So that's a little bit of the negative, but I think we got to be positive as well, because guess what? You found a way to win the game, and I think there are a lot of positives that have come out of this, and I think the biggest positive is that Mark Pope basically acknowledged, hey, we expect both these guys to be healthy and ready to go for March. So neither of them is season ending. Neither of them, it appears, requires any sort of surgery, and so that's the number one positive. But I think the number two positive that I saw is that, listen, Lamont Butler is such a, the term that the kids use, he's an energy giver, makes everybody around him better, makes the team better. And when he went down after missing games, coming back, playing at less than 100%, I think it would have been easy for the wind to come out of the sails of that team. Instead, he comes out. You never want to see that, but other guys step up. I mean, listen, the story of the game is obviously Trent Noah. True freshman from Kentucky, runner-up for the Kentucky High School Player of the Year to his current teammate, Trent Perry. He had not scored more than 6 points in a game all season long. He had 11 off the bench in what was by far his best game. By the way, the 6 points he had were against Brown. So for him to have 11 against maybe the best defensive team in college basketball, I think that's a little bit of a positive. Beyond that, I just mentioned Trent Perry, who himself played I'd call him Trent Perry. Travis Perry played very well himself, 8 points in this game. And I thought this is that, listen, I know that Otega Owe, first of all, I think Otega Owe, in my opinion, is becoming just a true alpha, a true star. He did not have a great night in this game, but what was most important about this game was that in the big moments when his team needed him, he absolutely made some monster plays. Big dunk late, the block and the block on one end and the dunk on the other. And so I just bring it up because to me, you're talking about a leader emerging. And I think, listen, the term is a little bit overblown, and alpha is emerging for this team as well. And so I think those are absolutely the positives. And I think the biggest positive, it's not like some big secret. Kentucky's playing some real defense here. Listen, I'm not going to sit here and lie and say that, facing South Carolina and Tennessee is like playing the Warriors in their prime a few years ago, okay? But listen, in this game, they held Tennessee to 42% shooting from the field, 3 of 18 from 3. Remember, this is the same team that gave up 100-plus points to Alabama at Rupp, 100 points to Florida at Rupp. What was it? 85-86 to Ohio State on a neutral, 90-plus at Mississippi State. They found a way to win a lot of those games, but it doesn't change the fact that the defense needed to be better. So when you're holding any team to 3 of 18 shooting from 3, 64 points, that's a positive. Remember, even when they beat Tennessee a few weeks ago, the final score in that one was 78-73. So they hold Tennessee to basically 10 points fewer than they did a few games ago. And then I think the other thing is, it follows up a really good effort against South Carolina on Saturday at Rupp Arena, where they held South Carolina to 57 points, 18% shooting from three, 32% from behind the three-point arc. So you don't want to oversell it. You don't want to make it seem like it's the greatest performance that has ever happened in the history of basketball, but it is an important performance because you're showing improvement on the defensive end of the court. You needed to be better on that end. You are better on that end. And to me, that is the X factor for this team going forward outside of injury. The one thing I will say, two quick thoughts as we start to look at this game, but then also others as well. You know, the first thing that kind of stands out to me is, one, I do think what's important about this game in this moment is two things. One, the defense is getting better. Two, you know, and I think this is important as well. I think with this win, if it wasn't official already, you have clinched an NCAA tournament berth for 2025, right? I mean, you look at the resume, it's kind of insane. You have a win over Duke. We know about that on a neutral. You have a win over Florida. You have 2 wins over. That's 4 wins over teams in the top 5 in college basketball right now, not even including a neutral court win over Gonzaga, not including, a win at Mississippi State. And so, listen, the tournament ticket is punched. And so right now, I think the two focuses are this. One, keep playing really good defense. I don't know what's being practiced. I don't know what's being said. I don't know what's being said in the film room. You know, Mark Pope apparently broke some furniture at some point here over the last couple of weeks. That's great. Well, now let's make sure you continue to play at that level. 2, you just got to get healthy. And I mentioned it earlier, but I think Mark Pope mentioned this in his post-game press conference. He basically said, like, look, you know, we now believe that, listen, it's not great right now, but Lamont's going to be fine. Jackson Robinson's going to be fine. We just got to get to March, and those guys will be healthy. And so to me, what stands out about Kentucky is they got to get healthy, but if they can play defense like this, they can beat just about anybody. I've told you the analogy. I've used the analogy a million times on this show. We've talked about it a ton. I've said, go back to last year with UConn. Donovan Clingan was their star player, right? He gets hurt in late December, misses most of January. They bring him back in February, and he's really good, but I wouldn't say he was great playing at an All-American elite level. But he gets healthy. They basically use February as a ramp-up period, and by March, he was the best player in college basketball, and because of it, UConn was by far the best team as well. And so I just bring it up because if you're a Kentucky fan, the goal isn't necessarily against Texas this coming week. The goal isn't whoever. It's to beat any individual team. It's keep improving on defense. And if you keep improving on defense, you just got to get healthy from there, because the good news is offensively, you're always going to click, especially when you have all your pieces. And I think the other thing is other guys are stepping up and playing with confidence. We mentioned Trent Noah. We mentioned Travis, not Trent Perry, because I know the comments are going to go crazy. I apologize for that. But other guys are stepping up offensively. You have to continue to maintain defensively. And then from there, you just got to keep doing what you're doing, get healthy. But I like this team. Listen, it goes without saying, if you can beat Tennessee twice, if you can beat Florida at home, Florida, of course, just had the best win of the season at Auburn a few days ago. If you can beat Gonzaga on a neutral, if you can beat Duke on a neutral, I mean, you're talking about really 4 wins over teams that are going to be 1 or 2 seeds come the NCAA tournament. Duke's going to be a 1 seed. Duke's basically got the 1 seed locked up in Newark. Florida is at worst going to be a 2 seed. You got the win over them. You got 2 wins over Tennessee. Tennessee is trending between a 1 and a 2 seed. So I just bring it up because if you're Kentucky, keep doing what you need to do, but go ahead and stay healthy. All right, so what we're going to do, we're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we're going to talk about the rest of a busy Tuesday night in college hoops. We'll talk a little bit about UConn. Did you see what Liam McNeely did? One of the games of the year for anyone in college hoops. Liam McNeely with 38 points in that game. So we'll come back, talk Liam McNeely. We'll take some of your questions, Producer Matt. If there's a question or two that we can have lined up, that would be great. Then we'll talk about the rest of a busy Tuesday night in college hoops. And it's never too early to look ahead to Auburn versus Alabama. Yeah, that's going to be a fun one on Saturday. Quick break. Be right back. All right, we're going to get back to the show in a minute. But before we do, many of you ask me all the time, Torres, what can I do to help support the show? You give me hours and hours and hours of content every single week. What can I do to help you? Well, I'll tell you what. Do me a quick favor. Check out the Aaron Torres Media merchandise store for all of your team-specific shirts, hats, and more, all available at AaronTorresOnline.com/merchandise. A lot of you wondering, Torres, what can I get in that merch store? Well, first of all, we got our brand new Hope and Pope Kentucky basketball t-shirts. That's right. Mark Pope has arrived. He is here to save the day. Get your Hope and Pope t-shirts there. Also, Arkansas fans, the Big Pig Invasion is here. You can get your tees there. Basketball School Alabama shirts. More Hurley 2024 UConn shirts for your tailgates at Rentschler Field, your games at the XL Center or Gamble. And oh, by the way, your Mike effing Woodson gear for Indiana. If you love football, we got you covered too. We got more Dion shirts and hats than we even know what to do with. The freeze warning has hit the plains. Auburn fans, grab your freeze warning tees now. And of course, our new era, new rules shirt applies to Nebraska football and its incredible fan base. We have more coming for the fall, plenty in stock right now. So make sure to check out the Aaron Torres Media merch store at AaronTorresOnline.com/merchandise. And you can always hit me up with any questions. Aaron Torres Podcast. All right, everybody. I'm back. Good to be back. So, producer Matt, what kind of questions we got here in the chat as it is humming on a Wednesday morning? Kentucky, 7-1 versus the top 15 best in Division I. You know, I did not have that stat readily available to me. Doesn't surprise me, though. I mean, listen, like I said, 4 wins right now over teams currently in the top 5. That's freaking insane. And still have a game, obviously, against Auburn and Alabama as well. Now, the Alabama game's on the road, so they're both going to be tough. But, the tournament resume is set right now. Now it's just about getting healthy, staying healthy, being healthy for the games that really matter in March. Ooh, Andrew with a great question. Will Kentucky be favored on the road at Texas without Lamont Butler and without Jackson Robinson? Whew. I mean, I don't know. It's tough for me to say. Right now, I would probably lean no on that one. But listen, it doesn't really matter. I mean, listen, you've won at Tennessee. You've won at Mississippi State. I know that those games, varying degrees of more health, it'll be tough, but Texas is not an unbeatable team. I mean, Texas seems to get beat every single time I watch them. Lost to Arkansas last week, lost to Alabama. They got destroyed at home on Tuesday night. By the way, does Texas play every game at home? Their schedule so far has been insane. Texas has already played Tennessee at home, Auburn at home, Arkansas at home, then played Alabama on Tuesday night. And now, oh, by the way, you get Kentucky coming to town on Saturday. That is not a bad deal. Tell you what I'm going to do. So let's see. Producer Matt says Texas has already played 4 teams that were ranked number 2 in the country at home this year. I'd have to look into that, but that sounds about right. They also played UConn at home. Listen, I don't know how many people care about Texas basketball, but think about that home slate. UConn at home, Auburn at home, UConn at home, Tennessee at home, Arkansas at home, Alabama at home, and now you still get Kentucky coming to town this week. That's not a bad deal. All right, one more comment, and then we will continue on with the show. Keep dropping your comments. Let's see what this one is. Johnny says, suddenly the LSU game tonight looks way bigger than the Rupp game for Arkansas, huh? Well, it depends. It depends what I think it's more important to pick up good wins versus most teams, I should say, are going to take bad losses. So we're going to talk about UConn in a minute. They took a bad loss to Dayton and Maui. That is a bad loss right now, but they offset it with a big win against Creighton. And so to me, I think that the Kentucky win, especially as Kentucky plays well, I think that is going to continue to prop up Arkansas as opposed to an LSU loss dragging them down. The one thing I will say, Arkansas probably, unless they go on a real run here, is going to be living life for most of the regular season on the bubble. Getting swept by LSU would be less than ideal. All right, so what I'm going to do, we're going to talk UConn in half a second. I got a jacket I'm just going to throw on really quick because my room suddenly got cold. It was hot. Now I'm cold again. So let me put on a jacket, and then we'll get to the rest of the show. Okay, hold on. So this is real life stuff right here, people. Hold up. Getting some real life Torres right here. Real life Torres. Okay. Jacket on. Jacket zipped. Torres resetting for the back half of the show. All right, let's keep this bad boy going. All right, let's keep it going. Let's talk Tuesday night hoops. So we just talked obviously the top 25 matchup, Kentucky versus Tennessee. There was another top 20 matchup that we will discuss here in just one moment. But with that said, I do want to switch gears, and I do want to talk about what ended up being a very consequential game in the Big East, okay? So we've talked a decent amount of Big East basketball. St. John's running away with the league. UConn has certainly had peaks and flows, ebbs and valleys over the course of the season. But really, and we'll talk about this in a minute, UConn's resume, if you actually look at it, some really good wins headlined by the Marquette game on the road a few weeks ago. But a couple not very good losses. And I'll say this, UConn quietly sort of needed a big game against Creighton on Tuesday night. The issue is, and I know what you'll say is, well, it's Creighton, whatever. But it's like if you follow college, if you're a basketball diehard, UConn has actually been the team that has actually given UConn the most trouble in the Big East is Creighton. Coming into this game, since UConn rejoined the Big East in 2020-2021 season, you know UConn is 2-8 against Creighton. The stat that I use, UConn last year went 37-3. Their only loss at full strength, they had 3 losses. One was to Kansas. Steph Castle didn't play. Steph Castle ended up being a lottery pick. The second loss at Seton Hall, a game where Donovan Clingan got hurt midway through, did not return. The only loss where they had all 5 starters in the lineup was at Creighton. So Creighton is a team that, for whatever reason, seems to have UConn's number. Well, they didn't on Tuesday night, at least not when it mattered. They jumped out to an early lead and were in control going into the second half and maybe partway through the second half. But UConn rallies. UConn gets the 70-66 win. This is the first win UConn has had against Creighton since they rejoined the Big East. And it is because of one man and one man only, Liam McNeely, the freshman. Remember during portal season when Liam McNeely decommitted from Indiana, we kept talking about this kid. Who is this kid? And Mark Pope was going after him, and John Calipari was going after him. I know John Calipari just was dying to get this kid. Well, UConn ended up getting him. He's been in and out of the lineup with an injury, missed basically all of January. Well, he comes back, and he has a game for the ages, 38 points. UConn gets the victory. As I said, the first win for UConn ever at Creighton. This one is big. We'll talk about it in a minute. But you know what we got to talk about first? Dan freaking Hurley. So first of all, this video popped up after the game. Producer Matt showed Dan Hurley on the court following the victory. That was Dan Hurley, a typical Dan Hurley fashion, showing the crowd, saying, just thanking the crowd for showing up, saying, bye, 2 rings, the insinuation, of course, being that UConn is the 2-time national champion. Then, by the way, that was via Grace Boyles of one of the local news stations. Then here was Dan Hurley talking about, frankly, why he did that, but I think as importantly, the significance of this win for UConn, because it actually was a big one.
I just wish there was more people still here. That was the only thing, because when I've gotten my butt kicked in here, minus the COVID year, which we would all like to forget, where I think this was the only place we came to that actually had fans that year. But I've obviously had to walk off unceremoniously, just crushed by the crowd and, cursed at but I don't really, as long as they're not leaning over the rail and getting in my face. I mean, I think it's what makes college sports so much better, or college basketball so much better than any other type of basketball is, you got your, although the home fans here didn't get the win that they wanted, but they got a show. I mean, they got an intense game with, with so much passion and a life or death struggle. I'm not going to lie to you. I mean, that was very gratifying. I waved at some people, but I just wish that there was more of them still left.
That was Dan Hurley in the manner that only Dan Hurley can. I wish there were more of them. There's usually more when their team wins. So listen, Dan Hurley, I think, actually did a very good job of explaining, that this has become, I'll even say this. I'll give credit to my buddy Jared Kotler, who does a very popular UConn basketball podcast. And he basically said, CT Scoreboard, by the way, is the name of that podcast. He basically said, he's like, Creighton has sort of become UConn's rival in the Big East. Historically, it was maybe Providence. Maybe in the future, it will be St. John's, depending on how long Rick Pitino stays. But Creighton has kind of become UConn's rival with the struggles. And so I bring it up because they needed a win. They get a win. And listen, I know when Dan Hurley goes viral after a game, that's always going to be a story. But as you can see on the ticker, the story of the game was Liam freaking McNeely as well. Okay. So Liam McNeely, to me, I mean, listen, again, we talked about him so much in the spring, the impact that he had, the importance that he would have on this program. And he was great early on. But like I've told you, he's missed over a month with a sprained ankle, badly sprained ankle. He came back on Friday against St. John's. He looked okay. Well, this was, I can't say it's the best game he's ever played, period, because he's played a lot of big games. This is the best game he's ever played as a UConn Husky. 38 points. What's crazy is 9 points to open the game. He had 23 at the half, and then he had 6 straight points at one point that really kind of swung the game. Back-to-back threes. UConn takes the lead, and they never really relinquished it after that. And so this was the game of a lifetime for Liam McNeely. I think what's also important, it's a game that really sort of mattered to UConn. Listen, I didn't want to be a fatalist and too negative and this and that. But listen, if UConn had lost this game, UConn's NCAA tournament resume probably isn't quite as strong as I think a lot of people think. Listen, couple great wins, most notably at Marquette. But prior to Tuesday night, first of all, you have a really bad loss against Dayton in Maui. That is a quad 3 loss, I believe, as of right now. Colorado is one of the worst teams in the Big 12. You lost to them in Maui as well. And you've kind of been okay in the Big East, but you haven't been great. Now, part of it is you did not have Liam McNeely, but you have a loss at Villanova. You have a loss at Xavier. Those aren't bad losses, but those are games that you would have liked to have. And then, oh, by the way, the out-of-conference schedule just really has not held up the way that you thought. You won at Texas, but we just talked about Texas a minute ago. Texas is 15-10 right now, probably going to miss the NCAA tournament. You lost, you beat Gonzaga, but Gonzaga's good, but they're struggling a little bit, and they're fine, but they're okay. Baylor is struggling a little bit. So the out-of-conference resume has not held up the way that you had hoped. The Big East, frankly, is down, and you lose this game, I think you're probably, still in okay shape for the NCAA tournament because you still got 2 games against Seton Hall. Most of your biggest remaining games are at home, Villanova at home, Marquette at home, etc. But it's not out of the realm of possibility that you'd be on the bubble going into Selection Sunday. But you get this win. It's a big one. And I think what it proves to me is that you have real momentum now. Now, UConn all year, it's been up and down with the momentum. But also, you not only have real momentum, but you have a real star. And it's so funny because the one thing about UConn all season long, kind of as UConn has been kind of up and down, people keep saying, what's wrong, what's wrong, what's wrong? And especially over the last month, you could point to a lot of different things, a lot of different players that need to step up. But what you also cannot deny is that they're a different team when they don't have a lottery pick in their lineup in Liam McNeely. And so to me, that's what I kept going back to was let's see what they look like with a full roster. Let's see what they look like when you have literally your best player back in the lineup and playing to his capabilities. How would, Duke be without Cooper Flagg? I mean, I know Auburn won a couple games without Janai Broome, but you don't want him out for a month and a half. And that's the impact that Liam McNeely has on this team. And that is why this win was so important. And so credit to UConn. This was a game that they absolutely had to have. It was a game that they got. Liam McNeely was the difference. Liam McNeely was the X factor. Liam McNeely was the reason that they won this game. And listen, I just think if you're UConn, I think you have to feel really good. The one thing I will say, which is going to be interesting, the most recent bracketologies have had them as like an 8-9 seed, which sounds crazy. My only concern with UConn, I just don't know if there's enough, it's kind of a positive and a negative. I don't know if there's enough great wins to have in the Big East to really, really, really kind of impact your tournament seeding. Listen, I think if they basically won out, if you win at St. John's, if you take no bad losses, if you win the Big East tournament, then yeah, maybe you're talking like a 4 seed, a 3 seed. But realistically, I think this is like a 5 or a 6 seed. Now, again, it would have been much worse if you didn't win this game. But I guess the point I'm trying to make is that I think for UConn, it's kind of what we were talking about with Kentucky a minute ago. It's not about, hey, you have to be great and you have to be this and you have to be that and da-da-da-da. It's like, just make sure you're healthy and try to go on a little run here. Like I said, for UConn, the schedule breaks a little bit nicely for them. They do have Seton Hall at home Seton Hall on the road on Saturday. That's the worst team in the Big East, followed by a home game against Villanova before St. John's in about 11 days from now. So I guess that would be, is that a third? I guess that's a Saturday. I guess it's a Saturday. But you got 2 games to get right. You have to win them. But from the UConn side of things, I just think it's important that you got some momentum, that you got this win. And again, if you can get some momentum, I don't think you're getting a 2 or a 3 seed. But imagine being somebody that's a 3 seed and you get UConn as a 6 in your bracket. By the way, UConn is currently the 8 seed in Lenardi's bracket in the East. Imagine Duke having to play UConn in the second round. This team is getting better. It was because of Liam McNeely. We have to give him credit. But this game was so much bigger than I think a lot of people realize, and UConn gets the win. Keep throwing your comments in the chat. We're going to get to some of them here in just a little bit, but I do want to go ahead and switch gears, and I do want to go ahead and talk a little bit about some of the other things in college basketball that have happened over the course of the last couple days. I actually want to talk about a league that we have not talked about a ton, and I think part of it is self-inflicted. That's the Big Ten. So listen, Tuesday night was actually a very important night in the Big Ten. I would argue 3 really good games that unfortunately were all on streaming, all on Peacock. First game, it was up against Kentucky, Tennessee. I don't even know how many of you watched it if you're not a Purdue or Michigan fan. Purdue travels to Michigan. It's worth noting, coming into the night, Purdue, Michigan, and Michigan State were all tied for first in the Big Ten, all tied in the loss column. I think Michigan State might have had one more win overall, but they were all tied with 2 wins apiece. So this was a big one. And it was especially a big one because Purdue kind of pulled Michigan's pants down the other day when they faced them in Mackey Arena. They smacked them. It was over about 4 minutes in. And so this game returns to Chrysler Arena, returns to Ann Arbor. Wild game. Michigan ends up getting the win 75-73. What's crazy is they trailed by as many as 10 points in the second half of this game. They rally to get the win. First of all, from the Purdue side of things, listen, I know Purdue fans think Torres hates Purdue. I don't hate Purdue, okay? I thought the Zach Edey stuff was a little bit ridiculous last year. If you guys want to hate me forever for that, that's fine. Purdue's still a very good team. I'd argue they're certainly more fun to watch without a 7'4" dude clogging the paint. And then I would also add, they have maybe the best inside-outside combo in all of college basketball. Braden Smith in this game, 24 points, 6 rebounds, 5 assists. I would argue he is playing like a first-team All-American at this point. Trey Kaufman-Wren, who's kind of taken over the center position from Zach Edey. Remember Daniel Jacobson, the 5-star freshman, who's like 7'2", 7'3", got hurt early in the season. Trey Wren Kaufman played really well, 22 points in that game. But the story was obviously Michigan finding a way to win. We've talked a lot about Michigan, lost to Arkansas, lost to Oklahoma in the preseason, but they're playing really well. Dusty Bay is obviously operating at a high level, which is interesting, of course, with the Indiana job open, but Michigan gets the win, a much-needed win. By the way, Michigan is now alone in first place because did you see what happened right after this game? Indiana went to Michigan State, and Indiana gets the win over Michigan State 71-67. Why that's worth noting, 3 reasons. 1, Michigan State was really kind of running away with this league, believe it or not. They have now lost 3 of their last 4. They took the West Coast road trip out to LA. They lose to USC. They lose to UCLA. They come back to East Lansing, beat Oregon on Saturday. But they take the loss to Indiana here. So now they are outside of the first place position. I don't know that it ultimately matters, but they have lost 3 of 4. The other 2 noteworthy things were, 1, this win for Indiana obviously comes after Mike Woodson announced his retirement last week, which was basically a nice way of saying, hey, you can either retire or we're going to fire you. But then, of course, the big story here is that Tom Izzo tied Bob Knight for the most wins in Big Ten history on, Saturday afternoon. And so if Tom Izzo beat Indiana, Tom Izzo is the all-time leader in Big Ten wins, surpassing Indiana legend Bobby Knight. So for one night, Bobby Knight, it was a good night for Bobby Knight. It was a good night for his former player, Mike Woodson. I think Bobby Knight once said, I hope they bury me alive. Earmuffs if you have kids while you're listening. But Bob Knight once said, I hope they bury me, or not bury me alive. I hope they bury me face first so all my critics can kiss my earmuffs so they can kiss my ass. Well, guess what? I think Bob Knight rolled over at his grave last night and said, Tom Izzo, kiss my ass. I still have that record for one or two more games as Indiana gets the win. And then the third game, we don't have to spend a ton of time on, but Illinois beats UCLA. Both teams, UCLA had actually been playing very well. Kasper Siakis-Shonis has the big game there, 24 points. We've talked about him. I think he's one of the best players in college basketball. With that said, those were the three big games. Here's my question for all of you, though. How many of you actually watched the games? Because to me, I find it very, very, very interesting that the Big Ten with this new TV contract, Matt, you can put down the tweet. I'll pop them up in a minute. I find it very interesting with this new TV contract that the Big Ten has basically punted on midweek games. So for people who don't care, or for people who probably don't know, the Big Ten, all of their big midweek games now are all on Peacock, which is streaming only the NBC service app, okay? And so with it, NBC now, again, remember, the Big Ten signed that massive TV deal. It was CBS, NBC, and Fox all get a cut of the Big Ten. And so listen, during football season, it doesn't matter, right? Football season, you get two or three big games. One goes on NBC, one goes on Big Noon on Fox, one goes on CBS. You're fine. And when you have a game on streaming, it's basically a game that nobody except those fan bases care about. I remember Ohio State played Michigan State. Nobody cares about that game. Michigan State was terrible. I think Michigan, Illinois, or so, I don't know. The point I'm trying to make is during football season, doesn't matter. If there's a big game, it's going to be on linear TV, whether it's Fox, or it's NBC or CBS. Remember that Oregon-Ohio State game during the regular season, it was on NBC, and it was one of the most watched games we had all year because ultimately it was a game that people cared about and they put on live TV. But basketball is different. And listen, I think Fox does a good job of promoting the Big Ten, Friday night games, Saturday night games, Saturday day games. I think CBS does a good job promoting the Big Ten during the season as well. But for NBC, which really doesn't have a college basketball presence on the main network, I think this is crushing interest in this league from the national perspective. Listen, I find myself talking less Big Ten because it's hard to find those games. And I know what Big Ten fans will say, well, Torres, you just don't care. You don't like our teams. No, I actually think the product is very watchable this year. Purdue is infinitely more watchable, frankly, in my opinion, than they were last year when they were drawing 30 fouls a game. Michigan is a really fun team to watch with Dusty May. USC, even with they're not playing well, but I like watching Musselman's teams. I like watching UCLA. I really like watching Illinois. They're one of my favorite teams in America to watch, okay? But at the same time, it's hard to find those games. And so when there's a big game on ESPN, like last night, just take last night, big game on ESPN, Kentucky, Tennessee, big game on ESPN2, top 25 matchup, Mississippi State, Florida. Auburn, the number one team in the country, is playing on ESPN, SEC Network, CBS Sports Network has kind of an important game with BYU and West Virginia. It's just hard for me to seek out those games. Now, I did Purdue, Michigan because I knew we were going to talk about it, but I think it's hurting the casual fan. And so I put out a tweet on Tuesday night basically asking fans this exact question. I basically said, point blank, you could pop it up, producer Matt. I said, random thought opinion. The Big Ten having all its best midweek games on streaming is hurting coverage of the league. 3 great games tonight, which is Tuesday, the games we talked about, that are hard to find unless you're a diehard or a fan of those teams, especially with so many good games on ESPN, FS1, and CBS Sports Network, etc. And so listen, you can disagree with Torres, but I had people in the comments agreeing with me 100%. You can pull those up, producer Matt. Let's see here. What was the first one? The comment from Shredder. I actually have Peacock. I watch it for WWE for what it's worth, but wouldn't watch those games because then I can't flip back and forth between the other games. That's the problem I am. Listen, maybe I'm the only person in America that still has cable and still likes to flip back between SEC Network and ESPN2 and this and that. But it's hard to pull up a separate screen to watch one game. And then the counter to that is if you watch that one game, you can't flip out of it to other games. And so I think it's hurting coverage. What was the other one, producer Matt, that I sent you as well? Jason Wood says, exactly. I said the exact same thing today. I'm genuinely curious how streaming has affected their TV ratings. Listen, I don't know how streaming has affected their ratings. One, it can't be positive. But two, I would also go back and sit there and say, like, you know what? If I am a fan of those schools, or even not a fan of those schools, I just think as a sports fan, we're all losing, right? I mean, if you go back and you just think about how hard it is, like this is the oldest cliche in the book, but again, to me, we're going towards this streaming world, and I don't think it's a good thing if you're a sports fan. I don't think it's a good thing if you love sports, because again, it's making it harder to watch. I think it's making it more expensive to watch. You got to add Peacock, you got to have NFL, Hulu, and Netflix, whatever. And so this is a constant conversation, but I think we're getting screwed as sports fans here. Because listen, you need Amazon Prime for the NFL. You need Netflix for the NFL. You need Peacock for this. You need Paramount Plus. I don't know. I could go on and on. I'm rambling, but I do think that it has hurt coverage. All right, this is what we're going to do. We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we'll get to a few more of your questions. And then from there, I do want to look ahead to the big one on Saturday. We got Alabama hosting Auburn. Number 2 hosting number 1. Never too early to look ahead. We'll take a quick break. Be right back. All right, we're going to get back to the show in a minute. But before we do, many of you ask me all the time, Torres, what can I do to help support the show? You give me hours and hours and hours of content every single week. What can I do to help you? Well, I'll tell you what. Do me a quick favor. Check out the Aaron Torres Media merchandise store for all of your team-specific shirts, hats, and more. All available at aarontorresonline.com/merchandise. A lot of you wondering, Torres, what can I get in that merch store? Well, first of all, we got our brand new Hope and Pope Kentucky basketball t-shirts. That's right. Mark Pope has arrived. He is here to save the day. Get your Hope and Pope t-shirts there. Also, Arkansas fans, the Big Pig Invasion is here. You can get your tees there. Basketball School Alabama shirts. More Hurley 2024 UConn shirts for your tailgates at Rentschler Field, your games at the XL Center or Gamble. And oh, by the way, your Mike effing Woodson gear for Indiana. If you love football, we got you covered too. We got more Dion shirts and hats than we even know what to do with. The freeze warning has hit the plains. Auburn fans, grab your freeze warning tees now. And of course, our new era, new rules shirt applies to Nebraska football and its incredible fan base. We have more coming for the fall, plenty in stock right now. So make sure to check out the Aaron Torres Media merch store at aarontorresonline.com/merchandise. And you can always hit me up with any questions. Aaron Torres Podcast. All right, everybody. I'm back. Good to be back. So JJ and Pawpaw says, Earth to Torres, pay attention to the chat. All right, I'm going to look through it really quick. Let's see here. Nobody says Torres gets lost in the UConn numbers and zones out. Actually, if you want to know what happened, my dog was going a little bit crazy. She was set to go on her little walk for the morning. I usually take her out, but on Wednesdays we do the early show, and because of it, she started going crazy. So that was why I zoned out. Nobody. Really quickly, I'll just check really quick. Let's see here. JJ and Pawpaw says UConn will make a run until they run into an SEC team. Well, listen, there's a lot of really good SEC teams. We're going to talk about 2 of them in a minute. Auburn and Alabama. Alberto has the opposite perspective. Never underestimate UConn. They will make a run in the tournament very, very, very deep. Listen, it's a matchup-based tournament. Listen, do I think UConn would struggle with Auburn or Alabama or Florida? Yeah, I do. But that's because those are 3 really good teams. Do I think they would match up okay if it was an 8-9 game against Vandy? Yeah, I think they would. If it was a 7-10 game versus Texas, they already beat Texas. So I think it does matter on the matchup. By the way, I think Kentucky would kind of be tough for them. I'm not gonna lie. I know we got a lot of Kentucky fans in the chat, and I'll keep it real. Torres ain't afraid to admit stuff, but I would sit there and say Kentucky would be a tough matchup. I don't know if UConn can put up 90 if they have to in a win. And so, yeah. Anything else really quick? Do you think Noah will take, this is a Kentucky question, do you think Trent Noah will take Chandler's minutes? That's, of course, Colin Chandler. Listen, as a guy that thought Colin Chandler was an NBA type player in the NBA or in college basketball this year for Kentucky, I'm a little bit surprised that Colin Chandler hasn't gotten more run. By the way, Colin Chandler had a really nice play, a dump off to Brandon Garrison at one point in that game on Tuesday night. I don't know why Colin Chandler's not playing more. Now, he obviously came off of a church mission, and so maybe he's just not physically where they thought he would be. But I thought he would be a bigger contributor. And so I'm a little bit surprised that he has not contributed more. So I think that's it for comments in the chat. Hold on, I got to get back to the chat here real quick. Was there anything else, producer Matt? Let's see here really quick. I do want to say this. Okay, so this is really interesting, and this perfectly segues into our final topic of the day. Andrew says the problem for SEC teams in March is that officials are not used to the physicality of the SEC. I don't know if it's true. The one thing I do know is this. We have a matchup of number 1 versus number 2 on Saturday afternoon at Coleman Coliseum. I certainly hope the refs stay the hell out of the way. So let's go ahead. First look at a number 1 versus number 2 matchup. Alabama hosting Auburn. We do not have a point spread, but as far as I'm concerned, not too early to look ahead. First of all, credit to these two teams. Listen, I know it would have been number 1 versus number 2 no matter what happened on Tuesday night. It sure was nice, though, that both of them took care of business on the road, by the way. Auburn goes to Vandy. Producer Matt was following that one with a fine-tooth comb. I know it got weird in the middle of the game. Doesn't change the fact that they win by double figures going away. And then Alabama just stepped on Texas's throat and did not let the foot off the gas. So we not only have number 1 versus number 2, but we have a lot of momentum. Both teams coming off a big midweek win. And I just want to go ahead and give my first thoughts on this game as we get ready for what I think should be it will be a really, really fun one on Saturday afternoon, 4 p.m. Eastern. By the way, you know how big this game is? Coleman Coliseum right now, get-in price at Coleman Coliseum is close to $300 with 4 days left to go before this game. I mean, are we talking about paying $400 to get in to see this game? $500? I don't know. I just know it's going to be an insane college basketball atmosphere. I cannot wait. Let me give you some early thoughts on this game. So we've actually talked a lot about Auburn over the last couple of weeks. We've kind of not talked as much about Alabama. And I've mentioned, I think Alabama, I'm stunned that people aren't talking about them. Now, I get Duke's really good, Cooper Flag. I get that Auburn in their own state has stolen kind of the national headlines, right? If you're going to talk about one SEC team, it's probably going to be Auburn. Kentucky's always a story. Calipari's always a story. So I get the idea that there are other things in college basketball. But Alabama right now is the number 2 team in the country, obviously deservedly so. And I think what's incredible is we talk about how awesome Auburn's resume is, and it is. Alabama's resume is insane as well. And I think it just speaks to the talent of both teams that in a league where pretty much anybody can beat anybody on any given night, both these teams come in at 10-1 in league play. Alabama, it will be over a month since they last took a loss when they host Auburn on Saturday. In terms of what Alabama does well, because again, I just don't think we've talked about them enough necessarily. First of all, they do everything well. I think it's worth noting, I really like the guards. Mark Sears gets so much attention. There's been a little negative attention, with the benchings and things of that nature. He was obviously very upset on the sidelines, whatever. But I just bring it up because LeBaron Philon and Aiden Holloway are both playing at a level that I don't think anyone really expected in the preseason. Aiden Mahaney was a guy who struggled at Auburn last year. He's averaging 12 points, shooting the ball much better than I think a lot of people expected. Really struggled from behind the three-point arc last year, hitting 42% at Alabama. And then LeBaron Philon, I'll tell you, man, like you talk about a breakout star in college basketball, true freshman, kind of a top 40-ish recruit, but he wasn't on anybody's, McDonald's All-American impact player list. Well, he's averaging 10 points per game. He is leading the team in steals. He's getting a bunch of assists, and those guards are really good. The other thing about Alabama, listen, there's a lot of teams that have size, and we talked about this with our Contenders Pretenders episode on Tuesday, is there's a lot of teams that have size in college basketball, I don't know that anybody just along the front line specifically goes as big as Alabama, which they basically have Jaron Stevenson playing the 3 at 6'11". They have Grant Nelson playing the 4 at 6'11", 7 feet, and they have Cliff Omiori playing the 5 at 6'11", 7 feet as well. And so I know Duke kind of has that stature of they're the tallest team in college basketball. I would argue nobody's bigger on the front line than Alabama, and it shows because I think what's interesting about Alabama, everybody's kind of talking about, Mark Sears and the three-point shot, whatever. You know what's crazy? They're not even a great three-point shooting team, about 34% on the season. Now, they take a ton, but they're only shooting 34%. But what I don't think people appreciate or realize, because you think Alabama's kind of a finesse team, right? They kind of do whatever. They kind of shoot a lot of threes. They play fast, whatever. Alabama is one of the best rebounding teams in all of college basketball, a team that currently, right now, as we speak, is the number 2 team in defensive rebounds behind only Illinois, and they have a top 20 rebound percentage, which basically means the percentage of rebounds that are available. They're top 20 in the nationally in terms of grabbing them off the boards. And so you look at what Alabama is capable of doing. It's not only that they play really fast. It's not only that they're the number 1 scoring defense or number 1 scoring offense in all of college basketball. It's the fact that they are the number 1 scoring offense in all of college basketball while also being elite on the boards. They create a lot of second opportunities for themselves, third opportunities for themselves. They limit your third opportunities. And so I'm just kind of blown away by what they do because I don't think they get enough credit. Now, defensively, they still need to be better, but it is sort of worth noting they're the number 1 scoring team in college basketball. 2, the defense is certainly improved. And 3, obviously, look, we understand that all the metrics are a little bit skewed because they play so fast, have so many possessions, etc. From the Auburn perspective, listen, we've talked a lot about Auburn. I don't think there's a lot of new ground to cover. I mentioned it on the Tuesday show. I think this idea that Auburn right now is not trending to be like a historically great team potentially, I think it's nonsense. Now, listen, they got to win some of these games. They still have to play Alabama twice. They have to play at Kentucky. So the easy part of their schedule is far from done. But at the same time, listen, we've talked about it. Have beaten 2 of the 3 best teams in the Big 12, Houston and Iowa State. Beat Purdue, which up until Tuesday was the number 1 team in the Big 10. They've now won 10 games in the SEC against teams that are 8 games, against teams in the SEC that are expected to make the NCAA tournament. Now we'll see if they all get there. We'll see if a Texas or a Georgia ends up getting there. But the wins are unbelievable. Tennessee at home, at Ole Miss, at Mississippi State at home. They're playing really, really good basketball. As far as what they do, listen, like Alabama, super deep. I thought it was worth noting on Tuesday night, Chaney Johnson, a guy who is not known as one of Auburn's lead scorers, had 20 points in that game. Chaney Johnson had 20 points in the win over Vanderbilt. And that is a guy who's really like the 5th or 6th scoring option on that team, and he goes for 20 against Vandy. Right now, as we talk, he is the 6th leading scorer on that team, and he goes for 20. So you have size down low, which I think matters. Now, they're not quite size-wise as big and as long and as athletic as Alabama, but Dylan Cardwell is a monster. Janai Broome is averaging 11 boards per game, and they're just so physical down low. I think what's also worth noting, we think of Bruce Pearl as tough and physical, his team specifically. I think Bruce Pearl's tough and physical as well. But we think about his teams as being tough and physical. And I just sit there and say, like, I think it's kind of the opposite of Alabama, right? Is that with Alabama, we think of Alabama as they're fast and they're athletic and they're this and they're that. And what does it mean? And blah, 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 and this and that. And now it's like, it's kind of the opposite with Purdue. We think of them as big, physical, tough, but are they a team that is skilled enough kind of on the offensive end of the court? Well, I'll tell you what, according to all the advanced analytics, they're not only offensively gifted, they are the best offense in college basketball. Number 1 in offensive efficiency, according to Ken Pom, shooting 37% from 3. And I think what's important is it's not only a guy or 2. Chad Baker-Mazara, 37% from 3. Tahad Pettiford, 40% from 3. Miles Kelly, 40% from 3. Denver Jones doesn't take a ton, but 46% from 3 on the season. 44% from 3, excuse me. So they shoot the ball well. They rebound the ball well. They are an elite team. In terms of my first thoughts, and maybe we make a final pick on this one on Thursday's show, it's tough. Listen, let me even backtrack by saying this. I think these, not only are they number one, number two in the poll, I've said for about 3 weeks, I think they're the two best teams in college basketball. Ryan Fowler's a host, tied 100.9 in Tuscaloosa. I go on with him every week. I've been telling him for about 3-4 weeks. I said, I think you two are the best teams in college basketball. I know Duke was ranked higher. I don't care. Duke's really good. And Duke might end up winning it all. They might make a Final Four, whatever. But I think these are the two best teams that I have seen all year. And I think I got to give the edge to Alabama. One, first of all, I mentioned it, the game's at Coleman Coliseum. And by the way, I know it's a big topic in Tuscaloosa that Alabama fans are selling their tickets to opposing teams' fans. I don't think that's going to be very much of an issue Saturday afternoon. I think it's going to be loud. I think it's going to be pro-Crimson Tide. I joke with my buddy Ryan Fowler. He's got season tickets. He said this is even a game that I might go to. So, any Alabama fan that has maybe sold a ticket for an Oklahoma game or something like that, I don't think it's going to be much of an issue for this one. Two, I do think they're one of the few teams that physically matches up pretty well with Auburn. Like I said, Auburn is physical and tough, but they're not as, what's the right way to put it? They're not as athletic as Alabama. And so, to me, I do think that's an X factor. I don't think there's many teams that can neutralize those big guys, and maybe, just maybe, Alabama isn't one of them. Maybe Alabama cannot neutralize those big guys because nobody really has all year. But you go 7 foot, 7 foot, 7 foot, basically across the board, 6'11", 7 foot. I do think that puts a little bit more pressure on Janai Broome. I think it puts a little bit more pressure on some of those other guys. Dylan Cardwell is physical, but I don't know that he's really big. And then again, I think the guard play is probably a little bit better at Alabama as well. So the one thing I will say, I will take Alabama to win. I'll say 84-80. The one thing I do pray for, and it's how I led this segment, I hope, listen, Greg Sankey, do me a favor. Greg Sankey, get your best officiating crew on this game, okay? What I do not need is what we have seen too much this year. 84 foul shots between Alabama and Texas A&M when they played at Texas A&M. What was it? I forget the number off the top of my head. I think it was close to 60 foul shots in Texas, Arkansas last week. What I do not need, Greg Sankey, is 50 to 60 foul shots. Let these teams play. Let them be physical. They're big boys. They can both handle it. That is my only concern about this game. Is this a game that gets ruined by the referees? I hope not, but I'll take Alabama to win 84-80. And yeah, producer Matt's already chiming in. If the refs are crazy, Sears may shoot 500 free throws. That's not hyperbole. Really quickly, I actually just want to look this up because I remember last year in the first game these two teams played, it was at Coleman Coliseum. Let's take a look. Yeah, it was at Coleman Coliseum. I vividly remember this game. It was the day that Ryan Williams committed to Alabama. Maybe I'm remembering wrong. There was one game where the two teams combined for like 1 million foul shots. It was a tough watch. Give me a second here. Let me see if I can find this game. Was it the second game that they played? Maybe it was the second game that they played. I think it was the second game. The one at Alabama, the one at Auburn, 85 foul shots between the two teams. Alabama at Auburn last year, 85 foul shots between the two teams. I'm praying. Sweet baby Jesus. Like Ricky Bobby here. Sweet baby Jesus. I really hope that the refs don't ruin this game. All right, producer Matt, any last questions before we get out of here? I do think it is time for me to go. Yeah, chat's looking pretty thin right now. Anything else? Plenty of players have a hard time in Kentucky. I think that's it. I think it is time for me to get out of here. If you're not subscribed to the Aaron Torres pod, please make sure to do so. Apple, Spotify, Amazon Music, Google Music, wherever you listen to podcasts, make sure that you're subscribed. I don't know if I just went out for half a second. If so, I apologize. Make sure you're subscribed. Make sure you're following on social media at Aaron_Torres on Twitter, at Aaron Torres Pod on Instagram, Aaron Torres Podcast Questions at gmail.com, Aaron Torres Podcast Questions at gmail.com. All for today's show. Appreciate the support. The chat was pretty darn good. And I can't wait to come back on Thursday. We'll be back Thursday afternoon. Again, appreciate everybody's support, and we'll do it all again. Shout out to Torrent Craig. Shout out to Rachel, who hates my voice. Shout out to JJ Reddick. You F-head, unblock me, bro. By the way, people, can we get to 50K? I've been asking nicely. I've been polite. We are currently, as I record here, at 49,887 subscribers. We need to get to 50K. We'll see if we can do it on Thursdays, Aaron Torres Pod.